Welcome back to the Ed Show. Florida helped put George W. Bush over the top in the 2000 presidential election. Last night, we told you about the effort underway in the Sunshine State to purge Hispanics, Democratic, and independent voters from the voting rolls. Ohio, back in action. Well, of course, that was the key for George W. Bush's victory in 2004. And now Republicans in that state want to punish voters for the mistakes poll workers make. Dahlia Lithwick of Slate.com reported Republicans are seeking to overturn a 2010 consent decree issued by a federal judge. The decree established that a valid ballot cast by an eligible voter should not be thrown out in the case of the poll worker making a mistake. In other words, the decree obviously protects voters. Republican state lawmakers filed an action in the Ohio Supreme Court, but the judge who issued the decree ordered the lawmakers to stop challenging it. Now the Republican Secretary of State is starting to step in, and he says he will seek to invalidate the decree. It's just the latest effort by Ohio Republicans to suppress the vote. The Republican Party also tried to prohibit poll workers from assisting voters. If a voter showed up at the wrong place and started asking questions, well, you can't help them. Republicans inserted language into a bill that banned poll workers from answering simple voter questions about, okay, where do I go if I'm at the wrong place? The Republicans don't want that question answered. The legislation was withdrawn after it was set to be rejected by voters in a referendum. So this is a power play. How is it going to play out? I'm joined tonight by Judith Brown Dianis, attorney and co-director of the Advancement Project. Judith, great to have you with us tonight. You bet. This is a real power struggle, isn't it? You've got a federal judge and a Secretary of State in Ohio, locking horns on this. Where does this stand right now, and who's going to win this thing?
Well, it's at a standstill for the moment. I mean, we have to put Ohio in perspective. What's happening in Ohio is part of the pattern of what's happened across the country, where states are trying to make it harder to vote for those who turned out in record numbers in 2008. So black voters, Latino voters, students, college students, and the elderly. And so this is really about suppressing the vote. The idea by the right wing is that if you make it harder for those groups to vote, they won't turn out. And if they don't turn out, you win. And so that's what this is a pattern of. For the state to say, this is ridiculous. I mean, think about it, Ed. If you show up at the wrong polling place, the poll worker doesn't have to tell you where to go. I mean, why are we making it harder for people? The reason we're making it harder is because we don't want them to vote. That's the right wing conspiracy.
Well, I think it speaks volumes of how they feel about the elderly in this country. I mean, let's face it. The elderly come in, they may not be as secure as younger voters. They start asking some questions. Right. They don't get answers. And then I'm amazed that the Republicans would go so far to have workers. What are the workers there for? They're there to help the people, to make sure that democracy works. This is not about voter fraud. Judith, don't you think that this is the big message? This is not about voter fraud at all.
No, this is not about voter fraud. They're not preventing fraud. They're preventing voting. And so we need to understand that this is, the right wing had a plan, and the plan was to make it harder to vote for those who turned out in 2008. And you think about it, Ohio, we have to put it in context. We have a fight over collective bargaining in Ohio. The same people who want to take our jobs, who have taken our homes, now want to take our vote so that we cannot participate. They know what they're up to, and they're trying to make it harder for partisan gain.
Do we know when the Ohio Supreme Court is going to intervene on this, or you've got the federal judge telling the Secretary of State to back off? I mean, what has to be done? What can Ohio residents do about this? What's the next alert?
Well, I think that the great thing in Ohio is that there's been a lot of activity by the unions, by civic engagement groups, and by the citizens. They keep pushing. And we have to keep the heat on, not only in Ohio, but in states like Florida and Pennsylvania, where they have passed these voter suppression laws. In Florida, where they're trying to purge hundreds of thousands of people. We have to keep the pressure on. We don't know what's going to happen in the courts, but the bottom line is that the Secretary of State of of Ohio could actually do something about this. And unfortunately, he wants to do the wrong thing. He doesn't want to be on the side of participation. He wants to be on the side of voter suppression.
Well, we will contact the Ohio Secretary of State and try to get him on this program next week and try to have him explain to we want him to explain to us what's the mission here. Why are they doing this? I mean, this seems so partisan after a federal judge has made a ruling on it. We're going to follow up on it. Judith Brown Dianis, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. There's a lot more coming up in the next half hour of The Ed Show. Stay with us.
It is hard. He's not an American. He's just not an American.
The birther congressman who attacked the president makes it even worse today. And the John Edwards trial takes a crazy turn. Was John Edwards busted flirting with a juror? A big panel is all over it tonight. And in Wisconsin, the numbers keep getting better for Tom Barrett. But could President Obama put him over the top in the Walker recall? My advice for the president is ahead.